I built the sales infrastructure for over 50 online businesses, for software companies, coaching companies, B2B agencies, you name it, I've built it. And we've generated millions through it. If you've got a sales team that isn't performing, or you're about to hire your first rep and you want to make sure you do it properly, this is the full picture. Recruiting, onboarding, managing the team, the meetings, the metrics and KPIs, the backend selling systems, the pricing psychology, the CRM, start to finish, everything you need to know. This is the most in-depth guide on building a true sales infrastructure on the internet. Let's get into it. Now, most founders think the hard part of building a sales team is the hiring. It's not. Hiring is one of the easier parts. The hard part is the week after someone starts, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, right? Because managing a sales team and getting them to produce revenue is different to just managing anyone else in your business. Feedback loops are shorter. The numbers tell you very quickly what's going on, what's not working, and decisions you avoid show up in the data quicker than you realize. Here's the mistake that I see most often, and it is one of the most expensive ones, which is founders hire a rep, right? Their numbers are okay, but they're not phenomenal. They tell themselves, it's early days, and they give it another week, another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks, and numbers don't move, right? And you might send a voice note and a message saying, hey, we need to do better. And the rep's just like, okay, all good, I'll do my best. And nothing changes, right? And I've been in this same situation, right? I had a closer on a client's team. That closer's close rate was sitting on around 10 to 15%. I gave him a specific timeline, right? I gave him 7 to 11 days to improve, or we'd have to part ways. And those, 7 to 11 days passed. He didn't improve, and I kept him on, gave him the benefit of the doubt, because I genuinely thought his numbers could turn around. Long story short, they didn't, right? And 2 more weeks of the exact same numbers of what I seen previously, and we had to eventually let him go, right? And that cost the business anywhere from 10 to 30,000 in revenue from, deals that didn't close, from him pushing away people that definitely would have closed if there was a good closer right there and then, all because I didn't hold to the timeline that I gave him. Most important thing is you manage output, right? Not effort, not hours on the phone, not how busy someone looks. Cash collected, your close rate, your offer rate, your show rate, these are the numbers. And when those numbers aren't moving, right, after 2 weeks of feedback and coaching, you got to make the call. And another thing to note, right, setters and closers are measured completely differently. A setter is accountable for things like speed to lead, their booking quality, and their pickup to book call ratio. And a closer is accountable for their cash collection percentage, their close rate, their offer rate, things of this nature, right? And you don't hold a setter to somebody's close rate, and vice versa. You don't hold a closer to, a booking target that a setter needs to be accountable for, right? And when each role knows exactly what it owns, most of the confusion goes away. For underperformers, first you check whether it's a skill or a system issue. Is the CRM broken? Is the script weak? Are the leads not being qualified properly before they hit the calendar? You can't blame a rep for a system failure, right? But if the system is fine and the numbers still aren't moving, right, you have a conversation, there's a clear target, timeline, clear consequence, and then you hold to it. A bad rep also who stays too long doesn't just underperform, right? They set the standard for everybody else, right? A players do not want to be on teams with B players. None of this works if the wrong people are in the seats to begin with, and recruiting is where most businesses go quite wrong before they've even started managing the team. I'll get into that properly, but first, let's get into the meeting structure, because that is what holds everything together week on week. The meeting structure sounds like the boring part, which is not the case whatsoever, right? Without a systematic way to hold your meetings with your sales reps, those calls or your meetings are just a group of individuals working on the same offer. With that systematic approach though, they start to hold each other accountable. They care about the collective numbers and not just their own. What I do personally is I run 4 meetings a week, right? Each one has a different job. They're all on either Zoom or Google Meet, and they're about 30 to 45 minutes long. Most sales teams I go into have no meeting structure whatsoever, or they have some type of Monday all hands where someone runs through numbers, everyone nods, and nothing actually changes, right? And that's not a meeting, that's a status update that could have been a message. The reason it doesn't work like that is, firstly, motivation and coaching and accountability are 3 different things. You can't throw all 3 into one call every single day, once a week, and expect all 3 to happen every single day when you're doing it once a week. Monday for me is motivation and setting targets, right? So the energy the team has on a Monday morning is more time than not the energy that they carry into all of their calls all week. Monday isn't just for feedback or crunching numbers. It's for reminding them why they're doing this, the goal, right? The wins from last week, their big closes, good moments, whatever that looks like, right? I also drop a written motivational message in the Slack channel every single Monday. Paragraph, sometimes a quote, can be a small thing, but it sets the tone for the week and it compounds over time. Tuesday is group call reviews, and this is probably one of the most valuable meetings of the week. So you can pick 2 or 3 calls from the previous few days, a closed deal and a lost deal. You go through them as a group, right? You play a section, you stop it, and you ask the team what happened there, what would you have done differently, then give your own take. And the reason this works so well is everyone is learning from calls that aren't theirs, and so the lessons land differently when it's not their own ego involved. Alongside this as well, a rep should be able to point out and figure out what are the things that they did wrong on their own calls via the bird's eye view that they have when they're looking at their own calls on these group call reviews. Wednesday is for motivation and numbers, right? And so the first 10 minutes is energy, right? Check in on how the week's going, call out anyone who's had a strong start, and then second half is where is everyone against their targets, right? And it's not to put somebody on the spot, it's just to make sure that the numbers are visible, and when everyone can see where everyone is at, accountability starts happening without you having to push it. Thursday is another group call review, right? And so it's the same format as Tuesday. And by Thursday, there's usually enough call volume from the week to find good material, right? Particularly calls where the close fell apart and you can get into exactly where and why. And then Friday is one-on-ones with every rep. Now you can do these in around 15 to 20 minutes each. And the same 4 questions that I ask every single week are: number 1, what is their cash collected for the last 7 days? Number 2, what is their cash collected goal for the next 7 days? And number 3 is, what did you struggle with this week? And if they say nothing, you push back, right? Everyone has something that they know they could have done better. Number 4 is, where can I, as a business owner or sales manager, help you most in the coming week, right? This one does matter a lot because you're not just telling them what to do, you're asking them what they want to see from you, what help they want from you, and that builds trust and it gives you real information about what's actually going on so that you can therefore help them even better. Now, run that every Friday and your reps will feel like they're being properly managed, and you'll also never be surprised by a performance problem that's been building up for 3-4 weeks without you even knowing it. Now, before I get into recruiting, and I want to go into that in detail, there's something that almost nobody builds, and it's the thing that determines whether a lead even shows up to the call in the first place. And so I'll get into the back-end selling systems later, but next is recruiting. And side note, if you are watching this and you'd rather have someone come in and just build all of this out for you, that's what we do at Salesify, links in the description. Next thing is recruiting, right? And most reps don't fail because they are bad salespeople. They fail because of what they've walked into, which is no proper process, no onboarding, just handed a script and a calendar link on a Monday morning and expected to figure it all out. And when they don't, they get fired, someone new gets hired, and the whole thing repeats itself over and over again, right? That cycle starts breaking at the recruiting stage, and it starts with where you're finding people. Now, the default that most people do is just job boards, right? They post a role, they get applications, they look at Loom videos or CVs, and they have a chat and they make an offer, right? The problem is a CV or a Loom video and a quick chat tells you almost nothing about whether someone can close. And I've learned this the hard way myself, right? I had a rep come in, me personally, and he had told me that he'd done serious revenue in his last role. He was sharp in the interview, he had good energy, I brought him on, and within 2 weeks, the numbers just were not adding up whatsoever, right? His close rate was nowhere near what someone with the kind of background that he mentioned to me should be hitting. And I started doing extra one-on-ones pretty immediately, going deeper into the calls. And eventually he just came to me himself and admitted that the revenue figures that he had told me he had hit were just not true and were not accurate whatsoever. I let him go that same day, but on my side, I'd already wasted 2 weeks of leads, 2 weeks of calendar slots, and a lot of my own time trying to coach someone whose starting point had been built on practically a lie. And that's what happens without a proper process. So learn from my mistakes. The 3 sources, and these are the ones that I use instead of posting job boards. First is recruiters. And so sales specific recruiters who work with closers and setters every day, they know who's performing, who's hungry, and who's looking for their next role. And so build a real relationship with these people. Don't just fire off a job spec and wait, and they become one of the best talent pipelines you'll ever have. The second is sales managers, whether that be they're currently managing teams or they used to previously. People who've spent years watching reps up close know who the A players are. They know who's underpaid and who's ready to move on to their next role and who's frustrated and just looking for something better, right? One conversation with a well-connected sales manager can surface 3 or 4 candidates who'd never show up anywhere else. Third is sales trainers and coaches. They see the talent in the room when they're training people, right? They know who's been getting after it and who's actually improving, all because they've worked directly with these people and they can vouch for the skill level in a way that a Loom video never will. The relationship that you build with all 3 of these different people is what makes all 3 of them work extremely well, right? They will only send you their best people if they trust you and if they respect you a lot. And that means being generous with what you know, providing value where you can, and just being honest about the offer, right? Do not oversell the earnings, don't undersell the difficulty, because when a rep gets placed and the reality doesn't match what they're told and it was a bad fit and they're gone in 3-4 weeks, that person who placed them will not send you their best guy ever again, right? So start building these relationships before you need them. I'm sure you're aware, if you're looking at this video, the worst time to be looking for a closer is when you need one next week. Finding the right candidates is half the job, right? Getting the wrong person through the door with a solid referral, it still costs you. And that's why that screening process matters a lot. And most businesses just do not have a proper one. Now, recruiting gets people in the door, and screening is where you work out if you've actually got the right person, right? Most businesses skip this completely, right? They have one quick conversation, the energy is good, and they make the sales rep an offer. And that is not a systematic process. Proper screening covers multiple areas, and if you skip any of them, you are taking a real substantial risk. Here's what happens when you skip that validation stage specifically. Someone looks great on paper, they interview confidently, they get onto a real call with a real prospect, and it just falls apart, right? The confidence disappears, whatever that looks like. The questions are weak, they either pitch too early or they never get there at all. And by the time you've worked out what's happening, you've already burned through 2 weeks of leads, and the mock call exists to catch this before it costs you anything. 4 areas in this order, which is first, their background, right? And the main metric that I care about is cash collected, not years of experience, not which companies they've worked at, how much actual cash have they brought in for a business. And this tells you whether they've been trusted to close at scale and whether they understand what the actual role involves. Also, have they done both setting and closing, right? Reps who've done both know what a good setup looks like. They don't just take it for granted. The next one is psychology, right? And this is an area most people skip, and it's where the real information, the real juice is. 3 things: ownership, right? When something goes wrong on a call, do they look inward or do they externalize? And the closer that I had mentioned earlier, the one that, I kept on too long, guess what he was saying to me every single week during those extra weeks that I gave him? Things such as the leads were different. Every time it was, the leads. It was never his specific approach. It was never his pitch. It was never himself. And that is the signal, right? Someone who can't take ownership of their own numbers cannot be coached, and an uncoachable rep is something that you do not want to have in your business. Hunger. Are they motivated by the craft or just the commission? The best closers I've ever seen want to get better because they love closing. They love sales. And lastly, culture fit, right? Will they raise the standard of the room or will they pull it down? The next one is validation, right? The mock call. Every sales rep does one before getting on an offer. There's no exceptions. You give them a scenario, right? A prospect with a specific problem considering your offer, and you play the prospect and you watch and listen, right? You're not looking for perfection on this now, of course, right? You're looking for foundations. Can they hold a frame? Are they confident without being pushy? Are they able to actively listen and ask very good specific questions? And a rep who crumbles in a mock call, more time than not, will not be better on a real one. The last one is commitment, right? One question at the end, which is, are you willing to commit at least 30 days to this offer before forming a strong opinion on whether it works or whether you're going to leave and stay on for a longer period of time, right? This filters out people who hop between offers looking for quick money, and it sets the expectation from day one that results need time to develop, right? A rep who won't give it 30 days is not worth onboarding. Now you've found the right person, they've passed the screen, you've made them an offer. Now comes the part that either sets them up to perform or quietly sets them up to fail. And most businesses, again, get this completely wrong, which is that onboarding section. You've recruited well, you've screened properly, you've made an offer to the right person. Do not blow it on the onboarding process, right? The standard onboarding process at most businesses goes like this, which is a rep gets hired, then they're sent a script and a Calendly link, and they have a quick 30-minute call to give them a quick overview of the offer, and they're live the next day. Week one, they get 20 calls and they close 2 people, and the founder looks at the numbers and decides the rep isn't good enough and lets them go or sidelines them. But that rep never had a true chance. They were thrown into a full calendar with no real preparation, no feedback loop, no coaching, and then judged entirely on the output. What you need to build is what I like to call the closer workflow before anything else, right? Everything a rep needs to do their job in one specific place. And this can be a Notion page or a big Google document. And what that should contain is the script, the objection responses, the product knowledge, the offer details, the pricing, the payment links, the onboarding forms, the contract, example call recordings, CRM education, communication channels, absolutely all of it. And if a rep has to message you asking where something is, that closer workflow is just not finished whatsoever. It should be complete enough that a new rep can get fully up to speed without needing to contact you. Give them 48 hours with it before their calendar opens or they start making dials. No calls yet, just learning. A rep who spends a full day with the material is in a completely different position to one who skimmed it for half an hour just before jumping on their first call. Alongside this, half calendar for the first week. And this is one of the most important parts of this section, right? You do not want to put a new rep on a full calendar in the first week. And I've seen this break good reps, right? It's either the business owner wants to maximize output straight away and they fill the calendars from day one. The rep takes 20 calls, closes 2 of them, and the business owner decides that they're not good enough. But the rep was still finding their feet, still getting a feel for how the leads behave on this specific offer, and half the calls they eventually take, that's 1 week gone. Now, 2 things come from this. They can focus on quality rather than volume, and you can actually review every single call, give real feedback, and have a genuine coaching conversation about what's working and what's not. That feedback loop in week 1 is what makes the difference, and a rep who gets proper coaching on every call in week 1 comes into week 2, 3, 4 extremely sharp. On the other hand, a rep who takes 20 calls with no feedback develops bad habits that are extremely hard to remove later. Once they're on the phones, you need to know whether what they're actually doing is actually working, which means understanding the numbers, right? What to track, what they mean, what good actually looks like. Now, the metrics and the KPIs. You cannot manage what you can't measure. And so if you don't have clear numbers, you are absolutely guessing. And when you guess, you keep bad reps too long or you let good ones go too early, and both cost you money. Now, here are the numbers that actually matter and what each one tells you. And here's also what happens when businesses track the wrong things, right? Close rate gets all of the attention, but I've seen teams with a 35% close rate still bleeding revenue because the offer rate was at 40, 50%. Half the calls, the rep never even presented the price, pitched the service, and they hit resistance in discovery. They not qualifying properly enough, and they got off the call without even making an offer. If your offer rate is low, your close rate will always look worse than it is, and you're measuring the wrong thing and you're missing the actual problem. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of numbers here because I could go on for days about this. These are the main ones for me that matter, and these are the ones that I track across all the different teams that we work on. Number 1 is cash collected, right? And this is the main one. You track it monthly, you track it weekly, and you set a floor and a goal, right? The floor is the minimum to keep their seat, and the goal is what they're aiming for, right? Both matter. The floor creates accountability, the goal creates ambition. Tracking revenue is important to track, but your cash collected is your main metric for where your business is at. Close rate, which is what percentage of calls taken result in a close, right? Your benchmark for this is 30 to 35% on cold traffic and upwards of 35 to 40% on warm traffic. When it drops, you go into the calls, you find the moment it's breaking. Is it the discovery, the pitch, the objection handling? The metrics shows you there's a problem, and then you go in and you find out what is the issue of that problem, what's the blocker. Next one is your offer rate, right? The percentage of calls where the rep actually presents the offer. If this is below 80%, you have a confidence or process problem that needs fixing before you look at anything else, right? Next one is show rate, right? The percentage of book calls that actually show up. Partly a setter metric. Are they qualifying properly before, doing day before check-ins, building real commitment on that setting call? And it's partly a systems metric, right? Is the pre-call sequence running? Are reminders going out the day before, the day of? Your target here is around that 70 to 80% range. At scale, if you're dealing with cold traffic, it might be around that 60% range, but as long as you're hitting that, you should be fine. Another thing alongside this is to get your show rate good, you always want to have a small booking window. You should not let leads book into your closers calendars 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks out. It should be always within that 3-day timeline. Next one is your cash collected percentage, right? It is the total portion of revenue you've actually received and collected in cash versus what you've sold in total contract value. Your target KPI here is at 60% minimum. If you're at 30, 40, you are doing something wrong. The next one is your booking percentage, right? Your booking percentage is the percentage of total leads that get successfully scheduled onto a closer's calendar, right? Your target here should be a minimum of 30%. And that's with if you're doing cold email, if you're doing a book a call funnel, you're doing ads, whatever that looks like, out of all the leads you get into your system, at least 30% of them should be getting onto the closer's calendar. If it's below this, you need to look at your setters, your drip campaign when the lead enters the system, and other things of that nature. With all of these numbers, there's a lot more of them. I could go into a lot more detail. You need to have some type of Google Sheet or dashboard where everyone can see everyone else's numbers, their own, and then off the back of that, that accountability happens without you having to go in there consistently every single day. Now, let's talk pricing. And most business owners either rush the pricing decision or they avoid it and don't do extensive research into what and how they should price their services. They pick a number that feels right, they put it on the call, and they leave it to the closer or themselves to just figure it out and see if it works, if it lands, and that's not a proper pricing strategy. B2C and B2B are different conversations, and so I'll go through both. The most common B2C pricing mistake that I see is having one specific product or price point, right? One package, take it or leave it, and what happens off the back of that, right? The people who could have afforded more pay less, and the people who could have stretched with the right payment structure say no because the single option just doesn't work for them, and you're leaving money on the table on both sides. So for B2C, you want those multiple packages. And if you're selling to individuals, you need to think across income brackets, right? Not everyone who's a genuine fit for your offer can pay the same number, right? 2 or 3 tiers is typically what I recommend. Each one a genuinely valuable offer, not a diluted version of the main thing at a lower price or a higher price, right? A different scope, different level of access, different price point, and the lower tiers bring more people in, and the higher tiers capture more from the people who are going to say yes regardless and who have a lot of money. The typical pricing range that I see work very, very well for the 2 or 3 of these, let's just say the first one, the lowest tier, you want to aim within that range of that 4 to 6K. And for that second pricing tier, you want to aim between that range of 8 to 10K. Now, for B2B, this is a different conversation completely, and this is specific to the agencies. You want to charge quarterly up front, right? Stop charging monthly retainers. When you charge monthly, you are one bad week away from a cancellation conversation. The client has a slow month and they get nervous, they look at the items and you're the easiest cut, right? You're permanently at risk. Quarterly upfront instead is what I've seen a much better option for multiple different reasons. And here's the framing, right? The monthly rate, let's say for example, 2.5K, and then quarterly is 6K upfront. And that's cheaper for them versus paying month to month. And it's also a higher single payment landing in your account, right? Firstly, the reasons why this works very well is your cash flow becomes predictable, right? The client is more committed as well because they've come in at a higher level, they've invested more, and you're not having a monthly conversation about whether it's worth continuing. Quarterly is the default offer, monthly is the exception, and it should be priced higher per month to reflect that. Another thing to think about when pricing specifically for B2B is if you're selling to cold traffic, specifically ads, you need to charge a higher amount, right? You're not going to be able to scale with ads if you're charging anywhere from around that 2 to 3K range, right? You need to be selling at 4 or 5K with cold traffic to really scale and have a good return on ad spend, cost per acquisition, etc., right? Once the pricing is right, it's the closer's job to present it in a way that gets a yes, right? The offer structure, how you frame it and de-risk it, is what makes the conversation as straightforward as possible. Offer structure, right? The offer is what your sales team is selling, and how you've built it has a direct impact on how hard the close is. And most people think the offer as just the deliverables, what the client gets for their money. But the offer is also the framing, the positioning, the risk reversal, etc., etc. All three are in the room on every call, whether you thought about them or not. The pitch that doesn't work sounds like this, right? Here's what to do, here's how it works, here's the price. No emotional hook, no new money angle, no reason to say yes rather than in 2-3 weeks. And when the prospect says, let me think about it, the closer has nothing to come back with because the offer was never positioned in a way that made the decision feel urgent or extremely low risk. Three things that I'm always looking for is done for you, right? The market is full of programs where the client has to go away and implement everything themselves. Done for you removes the I don't have time objection. You're not asking them to learn and execute. You're doing it for them. Frame every offer as done for you as you can. Even when there's collaboration, position yourself as carrying the majority of the weight. New money, not saved money. This is the most important framing shift, right? Don't position your service as something that saves money or cut costs. Position it as something that creates revenue that they don't currently have, or creates income that they don't currently have, right? Cost savings are nice to have. New money, new revenue is urgent, right? And when you can show a prospect that working with you directly generates income or new revenue that they're not generating themselves now, you've moved from a discretionary purchase to a strategic investment. Something along the lines of this is going to generate you X in the next 90 days. Lands completely different to this will make your process more efficient. Last one is a risk reversal. Most people don't buy not because they don't want the outcome, they don't buy because they're not fully convinced that they'll get it, right? And so some type of risk reversal addresses that. Some type of performance guarantee, a conditional guarantee. If we don't hit X, we keep working until you do at no extra cost. A conditional guarantee could be something along the lines of implement the system, don't see the result, we credit or refund you, etc., etc. Or some type of money back window. And so 14 or 30 days if the direction isn't right, or a money back window, right? So 14 or 30 days if the direction isn't right. So pick the one that works for your offer, but have something, right? And when a closer uses a genuine risk reversal at the right moment, it converts people who would have either said no. The infrastructure. This is the stuff that runs before the rep picks up the phone, and most businesses just do not build it correctly whatsoever. It's also the thing that made the single biggest difference on the Shore example I'm about to share with you. Backend selling systems are everything that runs between when a lead books a call or opts in and when they actually show up, right? And so most businesses have either nothing here or it's quite lackluster and there's no strategic play towards it, right? A prospect books and they get a calendar confirmation, they hear nothing until the day of the call or just a couple of basic reminders, and that gap is where no-shows happen, right? Where it's also where doubt creeps in and where someone quietly talks themselves out of turning up to that call. Two major things fill that gap properly, which is a confirmation page and a pre-call email sequence. Now, I personally had a client who had a show rate at around that 50% range. Half the people who booked were actually showing up. And so half the slots the setter was filling every week were going to waste, and half the closers calendar as well were gone. And so first thing we did was we built a proper confirmation page and a 10 email pre-call sequence, and the show rate went up to 75% within the first few weeks, right? Same setter, same leads, same closer, just the infrastructure between the booking and the call was completely different. Think about what a 25-point improvement in show rate means on a business taking 20, 30, 40 calls a week, right? That's 5 extra live calls every single week. If the closer is converting at 30%, that's roughly an extra close and a half per week, every week, from a sequence of 10 emails and a confirmation page. Now, the confirmation page itself, the first thing a prospect sees after booking, which is most say, thanks for booking, see you then, that is a missed opportunity. Your confirmation page needs to do 4 things, which is validate the decision, right? Make them feel good about booking before doubt has had a chance to form, right? Set expectations, right? What the call looks like, how long, what to have ready, build authority, right? A short video, a result, a testimonial, and give them something to do, right? Watch this before we speak. Answer these 3 questions, right? People who take action before the call almost always show up. And the main way I like to position this confirmation page is, firstly, we have our main video at the top, which covers a couple of different things, which is gives them context about the offer, sells them on why they need to show up, and also how to show up in terms of being prepared, being at a desk, being on a computer, etc., etc. The next thing after that main video is the FAQs or breakout videos, which is your 4 or 5 most commonly asked questions or most frequent objections, so that when a prospect lands on it, they can watch these quick videos. They should be in around the range of 1 to 2 minutes long each, and it is you explaining why these objections are irrelevant and they shouldn't think about them, right? And last but not least, you just have social proof. I always recommend you always have some type of client interviews, and just as a bonus as well, you can add some screenshots of your clients making money or getting the desired outcome that they want to get, whatever that looks like. Now, that pre-call email sequence typically around that 10 email range. Email 1 is typically that confirmation of what to expect, a bit about the offer, an actual like Google Meet link so that they can join the call right there and then, whenever the call is on. Email 2 is authority and social proof. Email 3 is a case study, and then email 4 is an objection pre-handle for the most common reason people don't buy or don't show up, whatever that looks like. And you can repeat that across the next number of emails, right? And each email has a specific job, and together they do something beyond reminding the prospect about the call. They educate them, and by the time they get on that call, they've already consumed content about the offer, the results, and why it works, and they come in warmer with fewer cold objections. This also massively increases your close rate, right? If your show rate right now is under 70%, build this before anything else in this video. It is the highest leverage change that you can make in your business right now if you do not have this. Alongside this, the confirmation page and the pre-call sequence only work if the CRM is set up properly to trigger them, track them, and show you what's actually happening across the pipeline. The CRM is the single source of truth for everything in the pipeline. And if you're managing more than 2 reps or booking more than 10 calls a week, you need one. It's a necessity. And the one I use and recommend is called close.com, right? It's built for sales teams specifically, right? It has better workflow and automation features than most things at the same price point. It's just the best one by far, right? And the most common CRM problem I walk into isn't that a business doesn't have one whatsoever. It's that they have one and it's a mess. They have no consistent lead statuses, and so leads sitting in new status for 3-4 weeks. They have opportunities tracked at the lead level, so you can't pull accurate close data from anything, or every rep is using it differently, right? And the manager or the business owner tries to pull a report and gets numbers that don't make any sense, or they're completely incorrect. And so a badly maintained CRM gives you false confidence, and you think you know what's happening in the pipeline when you straight up you don't. And so the resolution to this, a number of different things, is, as I said, lead statuses, right? And so every lead has a status the whole team understands, which is new lead, contacted, qualified, booked, no-show, cancellation, follow-up, won, long-term nurture, and each one has a definition, right? A lead doesn't move from qualified to booked call unless it's a confirmed appointment, right? And a lead doesn't sit in follow-up for more than 3-4 days without a logged touch point. The opportunity tab, 1 opportunity per call, not per lead, right? And so a lead might book 3 calls over 6 weeks. If you track it at the lead level, you lose all the detail. And so tracking per opportunity gives you accurate data on your show rate, offer rate, close rate, things of that nature, right? And so every opportunity captures data, rep, outcome, cash collected if won, the lost reason as well. If lost reason is very critical. So every lost deal needs a reason recorded with it, or else you're just completely blind as to what is taking place in your sales team. Reusing phone numbers as well is a massive one. I see a lot of times people do not buy new phone numbers and recycle new phone numbers. The likelihood of your number getting burnt if you're calling on that one specific number for months on end and just the one is pretty much 10 out of 10. Specifically on close, it happens on GHL as well. So recycle your numbers every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how many calls you're making and how many reps there's on it, of course. Smart views, you set up these for situations your team is most likely to miss, right? And so no shows from today, leads that follow up, cancellations from the last 48 hours, qualified leads with no booking. The easier it is to see what's not being actioned or what needs actioning, the more likely it gets actioned, right? And so the CRM gives you visibility. The next layer off the back of that is automation. So what happens automatically when something specific occurs in the pipeline or in your sales process, right? And so this is important because if the response to a no-show or a cancellation depends on someone remembering to do it manually, sometimes it literally will just not happen whatsoever. Alongside this, workflows are the automated sequences that fire when something specific happens in the pipeline, as I mentioned, right? And so prospects no-show, calls get canceled, new leads come in. Each one of these needs a response, an action that comes off the back of that action. And so the businesses that automate that response are the ones converting the most leads from their existing pipeline without the team doing any work whatsoever. With this, there's a lot of revenue sitting in most pipelines untouched, which is, no-show leads, cancellation leads. Every business has them, and most send one follow-up email, maybe two, maybe none, and then the lead just goes cold after that, right? A no-show is not a dead lead. A cancellation is not a dead lead. And these are people who raised their hand, something got in the way, the time was off, light happened, whatever that looks like, right? And with the right sequence, the right tone, the right spacing, the right sequencing, a good chunk of them will come back and rebook. I've seen this be upwards of 50 to 70% of, whether it be no-shows or cancellations, rebooking back into the calendar when the system and the process is absolutely dialed. And so the businesses that recover no-shows and cancellations systematically always come out ahead, right? Same lead cost, more closed deals. First one is your no-show workflow, right? And so email one fires 30 minutes or pretty immediately after the first missed call, right? And so it's short, non-confrontational, and it looks like something came up. No problem, here's the link to rebook whenever suits. Email two fires 2 days later. It has a bit more substance. It reminds them of the problem they wanted to solve, the reason they booked, the rebook link again in there as well. And email three fires 5 days after that missed call. The final one, it's something along the lines of, I don't want to keep reaching out. The time isn't right. Things change. Here's how to get back in touch, right? And that close the loop framing creates that bit of urgency without any pressure whatsoever. And this one converts people who ignored the first two. Now, if they rebook at any point, move them straight back into that pre-call sequence and stop that no-show workflow. That should happen automatically inside your CRM when you update the statuses correctly. Make sure you don't run both, of course, at the same time, right? Pretty similar to the cancellation workflow. It's a different tone, however, to the no-show. The no-show prospect didn't decide not to come, something got in the way. The cancellation prospect actively chose to cancel. You acknowledge it and keep the door open. And so email one fires immediately on cancellation. It's warm, it's no big deal. Whenever you're ready, here's the link. Email two fires 3 days later, right? You reestablish the value, remind them what the call was going to cover. Email three fires 7 days after cancellation. Same close the loop framing, keep the door open. And the same rule, right? Rebook goes back into pre-call. The tone across both sequences is the whole thing, right? You're not chasing, you're not pressuring, you're staying visible and making it easy for them to come back. That's the difference between follow-up that converts and follow-up that feels like pressure. Last piece, and it's a small one, but it matters more than people give it credit for. It is how you and the team stay on top of everything happening in your sales process in real time without living in the CRM all day, right? So that is Slack notifications. They are the real-time layer on top of everything else. Your CRM is your source of truth. Your workflows handle the automated follow-up, and Slack is how you stay across what's happening right now without having to check the CRM every hour. Without this, things do fall through the gaps. No-show happens, the rep knows, the manager doesn't find out until the weekly call, the no-show workflow fires, but nobody on the team has visibility on it. The lead comes back and rebooks and falls through the gap between the context that just wasn't shared whatsoever, or a deal closes and nobody finds out until someone mentions it 3 days later. No celebration, no energy, no culture around winning and closing deals. Both of these are fixable within one afternoon, realistically, within something along the natures of Zapier or Make or NAN, whatever that looks like, right? And 5 things that should fire into Slack automatically, which is a new lead, who it is, where they came from, etc., all the things that they inputted when they either submitted an application, responded to some type of email, whatever that looks like. Call booked, which is, who booked, which rep it's assigned to, when the call is, etc. No show, it's quite obvious who didn't show, which rep was on it, tag the rep directly. Cancellation is who canceled, how much notice. And cash collected every time a deal closes. The whole team, every time a deal closes, the whole team sees it in real time. This one matters more for culture. Wins get celebrated as they happen. And of course, some extra ones that you can add in there. Failed payments is an extremely vital one that I haven't spoke about in here. And alongside that as well, there should be a notification when a lead comes into your system and they don't book a call. It should have, hey, XYZ submitted a form and didn't book a call, and you can set that up in one of these platforms that I mentioned as well. As I said, build it in Zapier or Make, whatever that looks like. The trigger is an event in the CRM, right? And so a status change, a deal won, new contact, action is a Slack message to the right channel. And when you're small, 1 or 2 sales channel is fine. As you scale, you need to separate them. You need to put booked calls in one channel, wins in another, no-shows and cancellations in a third, etc., etc., right? And so you tag the relevant rep alongside this and every notification that involves them. Nobody should ever be out of loop on something that directly affected their pipeline. That is the entire thing, right? Recruiting the right people, screening them properly, onboarding them in a way that actually sets them up, a meeting structure that keeps them tight, one-on-ones that give you real information, the numbers that tell you what's actually happening alongside that, pricing, an offer structure that makes the close easier, the back-end selling system that warms leads before anyone picks up the phone, a CRM that gives you real data, workflows that never let a lead go cold, and then Slack keeping everyone in the loop. Everything here connects, so take one piece out and the system gets weaker. But here's the thing I didn't cover in this video, and honestly it's the thing that kills most sales teams before they ever get to any of this, which is knowing when the people you have are the reason the numbers aren't moving. And that's a different conversation whatsoever. If your team is underperforming, you're not sure if it's the system or the people, I've done a full breakdown on that separately, so you can go and watch the video above. Or alongside that, if you want pretty much all of this built out for you and more, link is in the description. Feel free to just schedule a demo and we'll chat there. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.